The moment the alien warrior squeezed the trigger, and the old human rifle refused to fire, the entire stadium erupted in laughter so loud it shook dust from the rafters. Cameras zoomed in on the useless weapon as an announcer shouted that Earth's primitive toys had finally been proven worthless, and the audience of thousands jeered and pointed at the misfiring bolt action like it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. But what no one realized in that exact moment was that the rifle had not jammed. It had refused. And when the quiet old man from Earth eventually stepped into the light, rolling up the sleeves of his faded jacket, the laughter began to die one throat at a time. Because they all suddenly felt something they could not name. It was not fear. It was not respect. It was the uneasy weight of witnessing something legendary without understanding it. James Harper entered the arena floor with a slow, unhurried walk, like a man inspecting a garden rather than a battlefield. His duffel bag hung off one shoulder, and his expression was the calm annoyance of someone whose meal had gone cold. The Galactic Warriors Guild called him frail. The commentators said the planet had run out of real soldiers and sent a museum artifact instead. Even the rookie alien holding Harper's rifle smirked and spun it for the cameras, taunting the man who had come all the way from Earth to retrieve it. Harper stopped 5 feet from the young alien, looked at the rifle, then looked at the awkward way the alien held it, and sighed like a disappointed teacher. The rookie raised the weapon again, shoved an energy suppression pin where it did not belong, and pulled the trigger. The hollow click echoed. Harper raised one eyebrow. The rookie blamed the gun. The crowd cheered the insult. Harper stretched out his hand, palm open. The alien hesitated, then shoved the rifle toward him with a mocking grin. Harper took it gently, like it was something fragile and alive. His fingers glided over the bolt and chamber, moving with the confidence of decades of muscle memory. He flicked out the stuck pin the alien had jammed inside and let it fall to the ground. With one hand he cycled the bolt, checked the chamber, checked the barrel for damage, then nodded slightly. The alien crowd laughed again, because they mistook his patience for weakness. Behind him, the Earth delegation stood uncomfortably close together. Their leader, a well-dressed diplomat, watched Harper with a kind of dread, whispering to the others that none of this was the plan. Earth wanted a peaceful retrieval. They did not want the universe reminded of who Harper used to be. They especially did not want the alien public taunting him. Harper was supposed to stand quietly, sign forms, take the rifle, and go home. But Harper hated when someone mishandled his rifle. And he really hated when people laughed at things they did not understand. Broadcast drones swarmed overhead as Harper inspected the weapon. He did not speak. He just stared at the alien crowd until the laughter slowly cracked and began cooling like metal losing heat. The cameras moved closer, capturing every wrinkle on his face, every calm breath, every tiny movement. When he finally tilted his head at the rookie alien, the crowd hushed. He flicked the safety on and held the rifle up. You loaded it backward. The crowd exploded again, roaring with laughter at the rookie, but Harper was not joking. He handed the rifle back. The rookie alien looked confused, tried to correct the mistake, and nearly dropped the weapon. Harper eased it out of his shaking hands and turned it around properly. The alien gulped and backed away. The cameras zoomed out and caught the Galactic Commander on the balcony. He was not laughing. The commander had already seen the file Earth sent as a warning. It sat on his wrist screen, glowing red with multiple classified seals. Inside were archived reports from ancient wars, blurry footage of a young sniper performing shots no other human had replicated, missions so dangerous they were considered mathematically impossible. The name at the top of that file was James Eagle Eye Harper. The commander blinked at the old man now standing calmly in the arena, wondering why Earth would send someone like him to retrieve a rifle instead of a battalion. Then he realized Earth had not sent Harper. Harper had sent himself. While the arena crowd began demanding a public demonstration to humiliate Earth, Harper simply walked toward the metal firing platforms the aliens had set up. The rookie alien scrambled after him, hands waving as he tried to explain that the demonstration was only for official participants. Harper ignored him. He set the duffel bag on the platform, unzipped it, and pulled out a single glove the color of worn leather. He slid it on, gripped the rifle, and stepped into position. The alien announcer shrieked gleefully into the mic, calling him an old fool about to embarrass his entire species. The audience roared. Targets appeared across the arena, glowing bright. Moving ones. Armored ones. Ones shielded with kinetic fields. The aliens cheered for the impossible difficulty level. Harper blinked once at the layout, recognizing every angle instantly. He looked over the crowd with the same mild irritation of someone dealing with noisy neighbors. Only need one bullet. The stadium shook with laughter. Even the Earth diplomats groaned. One bullet for 50 targets. The alien announcer almost collapsed from laughing. Harper chambered around, inhaled deeply, then exhaled with a steadiness that felt unnatural. The sound fell away for those watching. A ripple went through the air. When he pulled the trigger, the shot cracked like the universe had hiccuped. The bullet hit a shielded target, bounced upward at a perfectly calculated angle, ricocheted twice, sliced through a moving drone, and sailed across the arena into a wall of armored plates. It punched through them like paper, bounced again, struck another target, zipped into a hanging gong, ricocheted upward once more, and finally hit the last armored target head-on. All 50 targets went dark. Silence engulfed the arena. Harper lowered the rifle. Then shrugged. The aliens did not scream. They did not cheer. They did not laugh. They simply stared. On the balcony, the galactic commander whispered into his comm link with a trembling voice. "I want a trace on that man. He is not a diplomat. He is the American legend." And somewhere in the shadows of the stadium, a pair of alien mercenaries watching the broadcast hissed to their leader. Change of plans. Capture him alive. The shockwave from Harper's single bullet was still echoing across the alien networks when the galactic commander locked himself in his private chamber and replayed the footage again. He slowed it down frame by frame, jaw clenched, mandibles twitching with disbelief as the impossible angles unfolded in perfect sequence. The human had not just hit the targets, he had predicted every ricochet before pulling the trigger. No simulation could replicate it. No warrior in the galaxy had ever attempted such a shot, let alone succeeded. Harper stood in the frame with an almost bored expression, lowering the rifle like a man closing a book he had read too many times. The commander rubbed his temples and pulled up a second file, the one Earth had quietly attached with the rifle retrieval request. He had ignored it earlier, assuming it was human dramatics. Now he read every line, and each paragraph made his breathing grow tighter. Eagle Eye Harper, code name from the old Earth era, retired special operative, declared too valuable to be deployed after surviving 27 impossible missions. Half the file was blacked out. The other half looked like fiction. The commander muttered that legends were not supposed to walk calmly into arenas with duffel bags and annoyed sighs. Yet here he was. Meanwhile, Harper was somewhere in the arena's lower corridors being lectured by the Earth diplomat. The poor man was sweating through his collar and whispering urgently that Harper was supposed to avoid attention, not break interstellar shooting records in front of 3 billion viewers. Harper ignored most of the speech as he cleaned his rifle with a small cloth he kept folded in his jacket pocket. The diplomat begged him to let the security team escort him off the station quietly before someone filed a formal challenge, or worse, demanded a combat demonstration. Harper finally looked up and told him that the only reason he shot anything at all was because the aliens had insisted on mishandling his rifle like it was a toy. The diplomat pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered that even so, Earth could not afford another incident involving Harper. Every time Harper stepped onto a battlefield, the galaxy remembered why humans were feared. And Earth did not want to be feared right now. Harper simply shrugged, saying fear was better than disrespect. While the diplomat continued stressing political consequences, the arena's backstage screens were lighting up with commentary from alien news anchors. Some declared Harper a trickster who used hidden tech. Some claimed the bullet was magnetic. Some insisted the targets were rigged. Others whispered the oldest myth in the galaxy, that some humans were born with instincts that bordered on supernatural. The rookie alien who had mocked Harper earlier sat alone behind the firing booths, staring at the rifle's spent casing like it was a relic of a deity. Every few minutes he looked behind him, half expecting Harper to appear and correct his stance again. Soon enough, the Galactic Warriors Guild decided they could not allow the spectacle to end without reclaiming pride. They demanded a formal challenge. The announcers screamed that Harper must face their elite marksman in a contest. The audience went wild. Harper exhaled, finished cleaning the rifle, and glanced reluctantly toward the noise swelling above them. The diplomat grabbed Harper's arm, insisting it was a terrible idea and Earth would face sanctions. Harper reminded him that he had been sanctioned by better governments than this one. The diplomat tried appealing to Harper's age, telling him he had nothing to prove. Harper agreed he had nothing to prove to the galaxy, but he did have a promise to keep to his fallen unit. The rifle was their memory. No one mocked it. They climbed the stairs into the main arena again, and the roar of the crowd hit them like a shockwave. Screens flashed Harper's face beside the guild's champion, a towering alien with 6 fingers on each hand and eyes adapted for telescopic vision. The champion boasted that he had hit targets beyond a kilometer with perfect precision since childhood. The crowd cheered his confidence. Harper nodded respectfully at the alien, adjusted his glove, and walked to the shooting platform with a calm posture that made the commentators nervous. The announcer explained the rules loudly for the audience, describing a sequence of 20 targets scattered across the arena's architecture. They would appear for only a few seconds each. The first to hit all 20 would win. The champion cracked his neck, rolled his shoulders, and took aim. Harper leaned against the railing with his rifle held loosely, as if waiting for a buzz. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The champion fired instantly, hitting the first 2 targets with impressive precision. The crowd roared. Then Harper fired once. A single report. The bullet soared, struck the first target dead center, ricocheted upward, hit another, curved off a shield barrier at a perfect angle, and continued its dance across the arena. Each impact triggered gasps and widening eyes. The champion stopped aiming after the 8th ricochet because the pattern made no logical sense. By the time the bullet finished its journey, all 20 targets had blinked dark. Harper blew dust off the rifle barrel like it was nothing more than house cleaning. The champion stepped back with trembling hands. The audience sat in stunned silence once again, unsure whether they had seen a miracle or a threat. Harper turned away from them all and walked down the steps as calmly as he had entered. The diplomat hurried behind him, already preparing emergency statements for the next 20 political meetings he would have to survive. At the same time, in a dimly lit command ship orbiting above the arena, a shadowed hologram flickered to life. A figure with narrow eyes and a quiet voice analyzed Harper's movements, and declared that the old man's abilities matched the ancient human apex warrior myths the galaxy had tried to suppress centuries ago. The figure ordered a strike team to intercept Harper before he left the station. They wanted him alive. They wanted to study how a human brain could calculate trajectories faster than machines. They wanted to know if humanity had more of these walking weapons. As Harper stepped into the escort shuttle with his rifle across his lap, he felt a familiar twinge behind his ribs, the instinct honed over decades. Something was coming. He looked out the window toward the distant landing bays and murmured that retirement was never going to be peaceful. Not for people like him. The diplomat asked what he meant. Harper chambered a quiet round and said the universe had a habit of sending trouble right after someone proved a point. Above them, the shadowed strike team prepared to move. Harper's legend had reawakened, and legends always attracted hunters. The shuttle had barely cleared the arena docking ring when Harper felt the first tremor run through the hull. It was small, almost polite, like someone tapping the side of a car window. The diplomat assumed it was turbulence and continued stressing over the political disaster Harper had created, waving his hands and pacing so quickly he nearly tripped on his own briefcase. Harper ignored him and kept his eyes on the far corner of the window where shadows were moving in a formation too disciplined to be casual traffic. Years of instinct whispered that the calm was already over and the real trouble was seconds away. Harper rested the rifle across his knees, running a thumb along the cool barrel with the affection of someone memorizing an old friend before a storm. The tremor struck again, this time harder. A red alert blinked across the shuttle interior as the pilot shouted that multiple unidentified craft were approaching on an intercept path. Harper leaned forward and told him a quiet correction. They were not approaching. They were already in position. The diplomat froze, staring at Harper with wide eyes. The shuttle jolted violently as a grappling beam wrapped around the rear hull like a metallic snake. The lights flickered. Harper stood up calmly, bracing himself as if this was a minor inconvenience rather than a mid-space ambush. The pilot announced they were being boarded. The diplomat gasped. Harper responded with a sigh that sounded like someone annoyed at a late delivery. The outer hatch blew open with a thundering hiss as armored alien soldiers poured in. These were not arena guards or guild warriors. Their armor was matte and silent, built for covert operations. Their movements were synchronized and efficient. Harper immediately recognized the type. Professionals. The kind that did not speak unless necessary. The kind that planned 3 exits ahead. One soldier barked a command for everyone to get on the ground. The Earth diplomats complied instantly, arms raised, eyes squeezed shut. Harper stayed standing. The lead alien aimed his weapon at Harper's chest and repeated the command with more aggression. Harper tilted his head slightly, measuring angles, spacing, and distances like he was appraising furniture placement in a room. One soldier lunged forward to restrain him. Harper stepped aside with a lazy shift of his foot, grabbed the alien's wrist, and twisted just enough to redirect the soldier face first into the bulkhead. The others drew weapons instantly, but Harper had already moved. His age showed in his bones but not in his reflexes. He ducked under a plasma bolt, grabbed a second soldier by the armor strap, and used him as a stumbling shield to absorb the next shot. The corridor became a chaotic dance of kinetic force and redirected momentum. Harper disarmed one, tripped another, and knocked a third unconscious with the butt of his rifle. The strike team regrouped quickly, adapting to Harper's movements. The lead soldier switched tactics and ordered his troops to fall back. They did not want him dead. They were instructed to take him alive. Harper noticed their restraint immediately, which told him 2 things. First, they were under orders from someone higher than the arena commander. Second, someone had leaked his presence and capabilities to the wrong side. Harper narrowed his eyes as one soldier rolled a containment sphere across the floor. Harper recognized the device too late. It detonated in a flash of shimmering distortion that did not explode outward but inward. Gravity folded like a fist closing, and Harper felt his body slammed into the deck. His rifle skidded across the floor and bounced under a console. The strike team pounced. 3 soldiers pinned Harper's arms, another secured his legs, and a final one injected a tranquilizer into his neck. Harper clenched his jaw, forcing his mind to remain awake long enough to memorize every detail of their armor insignias. He managed to mutter that they were using the wrong sedative for humans before the world warped into swirling shadows. The diplomat screamed Harper's name as the soldiers dragged the unconscious legend toward their extraction craft. The pilot attempted to fight back, but a soldier fired a warning bolt past his head, forcing him to freeze. Within seconds the boarding crew hauled Harper through the hatchway and vanished into the dark shape hovering behind the shuttle. Harper woke to the sterile scent of laboratory air and the faint hum of machines. His vision steadied enough to reveal he was strapped upright inside a containment frame with glowing restraints wrapped around his wrists. Alien scientists buzzed around him, speaking in hushed tones about neural mapping and combat reflex sequences. One examined his pulse and clicked nervously when it remained stable despite the sedative. Harper looked around calmly, taking in the room's layout. 3 exits. 6 scientists. 2 armed guards. A reinforced display case across from him holding his rifle like a trophy. He exhaled, disappointed but unsurprised. The lead scientist approached with a device shaped like a crown, and explained they needed to scan the neural pathways responsible for what he called impossible ballistic prediction. Harper responded that the human brain was not built by committees, which is why it worked. The scientist did not understand the joke and simply recorded the statement. Harper glanced at the display case again, noting the security lock, the proximity, and the angle of the nearest reflective surface. His mind began constructing a route out even before his fingers tested the restraint flexibility. The scientist lifted the Nero crown and prepared to place it on Harper's head. Harper tensed subtly, ready to move the moment a single mistake was made. The guard stepped closer, but Harper remained still, waiting for his moment. The crown descended. The scientist leaned in. And in that tiny inch of distance, Harper spotted his opening. With a sharp twist of his wrist, he dislocated his thumb just enough to slip free of the restraint. Pain shot through his hand, but he had endured far worse. He ripped the crown from the scientist's grip, swung it into the guard's face, and used the momentum to break the rest of the restraints. Panic erupted. Scientists scattered. Guards raised their weapons, but Harper had already rolled behind the equipment rack. He grabbed a metal tool from the floor and hurled it at the display case. The glass shattered and his rifle fell forward. Harper dove, grabbed it mid-fall, chambered a round, and fired one warning shot that ricocheted perfectly to knock both guards unconscious. The room went silent but for the ringing of metal. Harper stood, breathing steady, rifle in hand. He glanced at the open door to the corridor beyond. The alarms began to blare. He muttered that retirement was getting further away by the minute. And he moved. The alarms shrieked through the corridors like metallic sirens calling every soldier on the ship to converge on the lab where a 72-year-old human was currently moving through escape patterns that no training manual had ever predicted. Harper adjusted the sling on his rifle, cracked his thumb back into place with a soft grunt, and slipped into the hallway. The lights switched to emergency red, bathing everything in a dim glow that flickered with each pulse of the alarm. It reminded him of old covert missions where every shadow mattered and every sound meant a new problem. He breathed steadily, letting muscle memory take over as he navigated the alien ship with the same ease as walking through his childhood home. He kept close to walls, weaving around corners, using the rifle not just as a weapon but as a guide, tapping certain parts of the bulkhead to check for hollow sections that could reveal shortcuts. Behind him, the lab was swarming with guards and scientists arguing over how a sedated human had escaped restraints designed to hold the strongest warriors. One scientist insisted Harper must have dislocated his bones in a way that should have been impossible. Another argued that the restraints themselves must have malfunctioned. The commanding officer silenced them with a single growl and demanded they track Harper immediately. None of them understood that Harper was not just running, he was studying the ship. He noticed the structure was older than most military crafts, renovated with advanced tech but retaining the layout of a science cruiser. That meant predictable intersections, predictable choke points, and predictable ventilation lines. Perfect for him. As Harper moved deeper into the ship, he passed a viewport showing the distant glow of stars scattered across the void. He paused briefly to gauge the ship's position relative to the arena station. They had moved farther than he expected. These people wanted him somewhere no one could interfere. Harper muttered to himself that he should have known the galaxy would eventually drag him back into its messes. He kept walking, rifle raised low but ready. The footsteps of guards approached from the left side of the corridor. Harper slipped into a maintenance alcove just as a squad rounded the corner. Their leader barked orders to spread out, and stated that capturing the human alive was priority. Harper waited silently, counting their movements and timing their rotations. When one guard paused near the alcove to check his scanner, Harper stepped behind him like a shadow, tapped him lightly on the shoulder, and caught the alien as he turned. A quick chop to the throat, a swift pull backward, and the guard collapsed without making a sound. Harper dragged him deeper into the alcove and removed a small multi-tool from the guard's belt. It would come in handy. He continued onward until he reached a control room with 2 operators monitoring screens. Harper peeked in, noticing a schematic of a large satellite network on one display. His stomach tightened. The image showed a weaponized array with the capacity to target planets. He listened as the 2 operators discussed the plan. The faction in control intended to unleash the satellite on Earth and broadcast footage claiming Harper was responsible. They wanted to frame humanity's most legendary soldier for planetary destruction to ignite galactic fear that would isolate Earth forever. Harper exhaled slowly, stepping through the doorway with deliberate calm. The operators looked up but froze when they recognized him. He lifted his rifle slightly and gave them a choice. They dropped their weapons immediately. Harper motioned for one to pull up a navigation map of the ship. He studied it quickly, memorizing pathways and key control points. The operator hesitated, trembling, but complied. Harper did not threaten violence. He simply stared with an intensity that made the operators understand that cooperation was not optional. Once he had enough information, he locked them inside the room with a security override he had learned from watching their hands. He whispered an apology through the door, knowing they were not the ones who made the decision to destroy Earth. He moved toward the central elevator shaft, but a squad of soldiers emerged from the opposite end of the corridor. Plasma bolts sizzled past him, scoring the walls. Harper ducked behind a pillar, letting his breathing slow while the soldiers advanced. When their positions aligned with a reflective control screen he had noticed earlier, he fired once. The shot hit the screen, bounced, then ricocheted between two overhead pipes before striking a loose metal panel that dropped onto the squad leader, sending the entire formation stumbling. Harper slipped out from behind the pillar, firing a second shot that bounced off the ceiling and struck the corridor's lighting array. The lights exploded, plunging the area into darkness. In the chaos, Harper moved past them like a ghost and vanished. He reached the auxiliary engineering deck where the hum of the ship's core filled the air with a deep vibration. Pipes lined the walls, and steam hissed from overworked machinery. Harper scanned the room, spotting a vent that led toward the upper command levels. It was a tight squeeze, and his knees protested as he climbed inside, but he forced his body forward. Age did not matter when duty called. As he crawled through the vent, he overheard guards nearby discussing how the galactic faction believed Harper was the missing piece of an ancient theory. Some cultures believed humans possess rare neurological traits that allowed them to operate at combat levels machines could not predict. Harper chuckled softly, amused by the myth. He was no supernatural warrior. He was just stubborn, observant, and unwilling to die when people were depending on him. The vent dropped onto an upper balcony overlooking the ship's command center. Harper crouched low, observing the alien officers working around a massive console that controlled the satellite weapon. The room was guarded by elite warriors wearing armor with unfamiliar insignias. Harper inspected every detail, mentally drafting the route he needed to take. Before he could move, the door behind him hissed open and two guards entered the balcony. Harper spun, grabbed one by the arm, and pulled him forward, using his momentum to knock the other down. A silent scuffle followed, ending with both guards unconscious and Harper dragging them behind a storage crate. He positioned himself at the railing and prepared for the descent into the command center. He checked his rifle, feeling its weight steady his pulse. The officers below argued over timing the satellite activation, while the commander shouted that Earth would pay for interfering with galactic evolution. Harper inhaled slowly, knowing he had no time left. He nudged open a service panel on the railing and slipped down a support beam in silence. He landed behind the console, practically invisible in the chaos of the room. He emerged from the shadows, rifle raised. The officers spun with shocked expressions. Harper's voice was calm as he told them their plan ended now. A guard lunged at him, and Harper sidestepped, knocking him into the console and shutting down the countdown timer. The commander screamed for reinforcements, but Harper fired a round that shattered the command display without harming anyone. Sparks rained down. Panic spread like wildfire. Harper fired the round into the reinforced floor, and the blast shook the entire command center like the ship had been struck by a meteor. The officers braced themselves against the consoles as sparks rained from ruptured panels and a deep groan rolled through the hull. Smoke curled upward from the floor where the bullet had punched a perfect hole into the hidden power conduits beneath. The lights flickered, alarms wailed, and a ripple of panic moved across the room as everyone realized their precious satellite weapon was no longer receiving stable power. Harper lowered his rifle slightly, not in victory but in recognition that this was only the first cut. The fail-safe would certainly reroute power, and the faction would try to activate the weapon manually from another control station deeper inside the ship. He stepped backward toward the shadows again just as armed reinforcements burst into the room. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, hitting consoles and walls. Harper dived behind a fallen support beam, feeling the heat of a bolt pass where his head had been a second earlier. The commander screamed for the soldiers to capture Harper alive, but the urgency in his voice revealed he knew that was becoming increasingly unlikely. Harper took advantage of the case and slipped through a small maintenance hatch he had spotted earlier. The hatch slammed shut behind him, muffling the shouting. He stood in a narrow access tunnel illuminated only by the pulsing red of emergency lights. His breathing was steady as he scanned the branching passages. The ship was massive and old, a labyrinth of updated tech welded onto an ancient structure. But there was a pattern to it, and Harper followed the vibrations running through the metal floors. The power reroute was happening 2 decks above, near the auxiliary core. He began climbing the ladder fixed to the wall of the tunnel, each step echoing faintly. Halfway up, he heard voices above him. 2 alien crew members were rushing toward the auxiliary controls, arguing nervously about the fail-safe triggering too early. They reached the platform above and began typing frantically on a console. Harper reached the top silently, crouched low, and observed for a few seconds. He never liked hurting non-combatants, but the longer they worked, the more likely Earth would be targeted again. He stepped forward quickly and tapped the first alien on the shoulder. When the alien turned, he struck him cleanly across the jaw, knocking him unconscious. The second alien panicked and reached for a communicator, but Harper caught his wrist and twisted it gently but firmly. The alien dropped to his knees, shaking, and Harper told him quietly to lie down. He obeyed without a word. Harper approached the console and scanned the readings. A countdown timer flickered on the display, indicating the satellite would regain firing capability once the auxiliary core completed the reroute process. Harper exhaled slowly and pressed a series of buttons, forcing a temporary loop in the system that would delay the sequence. It was not a permanent fix, but it bought him more time. He tapped the screen lightly and murmured that every second counted now. Suddenly, the floor vibrated with heavy footsteps. Harper ducked behind the console just before 6 heavily armed soldiers marched into the room. Their armor was different from the others, darker and reinforced with thick plating. Elite troops. Harper watched as they fanned out with mechanical precision. One of them approached the console to check the progress of the power reroute. Harper knew he could not fight all 6 head-on, not in tight quarters. But he could fight them one mistake at a time. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal tool he had taken from the guard earlier. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it across the room. It clattered loudly against a pipe, and half the soldiers turned toward the sound. Harper used that moment to roll out from behind the console, grab the leg of the nearest soldier, and yank him down. The soldier crashed to the floor, and Harper delivered a quick strike to knock him out. Plasma bolts filled the air as the remaining soldiers fired wildly. Harper ducked behind a generator unit, listening carefully to their movements. One soldier stepped too close to the edge of the generator. Harper swept his foot out, knocking the alien off balance, then used the butt of his rifle to deliver a sharp blow to the armor's weak spot. The remaining soldiers regrouped and advanced together. Harper fired a single round that skipped across a railing, bounced off a support beam, and struck the overhead coolant pipe. The pipe burst open, releasing a blast of freezing vapor that engulfed the soldiers. Their armor stiffened as ice formed across the joints, slowing them down. Harper moved quickly, weaving between them with swift blows to vulnerable points until they collapsed. He paused only long enough to ensure none of them were seriously injured. Then he moved toward the exit, rifle raised. He entered a large industrial chamber humming with energy. This was the ship's central conduit hub, a sprawling forest of cables, pipes, and power coils. Above him, suspended by thick support beams, was a transparent platform displaying the satellite weapon's manual override panel. If the faction leaders reached it, they could fire the satellite even without full power. Harper scanned the room and spotted a group of officers racing toward the elevators that led up to the platform. He sprinted forward, weaving between pipes, and reached the base of the support structure. He climbed quickly, ignoring the sting in his knees. His fingers found grooves in the metal like he had done this 1,000 times. When he reached the upper platform, 4 officers were already at the override console, inputting commands. The satellite's image glowed red on the display. Harper stepped forward, rifle at the ready. The officers turned in shock, but before they could react, Harper spoke in a level voice that carried across the platform. He told them Earth did not ask for war, and he did not want bloodshed, but if they pushed the final command, none of them would walk away from this room. One officer hesitated, but another sneered and reached for the firing control. Harper fired. The bullet hit the edge of the console, bounced upward, ricocheted off a hanging coil, and struck the control pad with perfect precision. The entire console short-circuited, showering the platform with sparks. The officers fell backward in shock as alarms blared again. Harper rushed forward and slammed the emergency power disconnect lever beside the console. The satellite image flickered, then went dark. He had stopped the firing sequence, but the deeper system still hummed with energy, waiting for another command. Harper knew the faction would not give up easily. The ship was still crawling with soldiers, and the satellite could still be reactivated manually at the core. He tightened his grip on the rifle, breath steady. The final battle was coming, and he would be ready. Harper stood on the trembling platform as the override console sputtered and smoked beneath a shower of sparks, its circuits failing in a cascade of electrical collapse. The officers who had tried to activate the satellite scrambled away from the console like startled insects, their courage evaporating as they realized the man standing before them had just made the firing mechanism of a planet-killer collapse with nothing more than a well-placed ricochet. The hum of the ship's core deepened, vibrating through the metal under Harper's boots. He knew what that sound meant. The faction leaders were about to trigger their final contingency plan. If they could not fire the satellite, they would destroy the ship and make it appear as if Harper had sabotaged everything. A dead legend could not defend his reputation, and a destroyed ship could still frame Earth for aggression. Harper breathed slowly, feeling the weight of the rifle in his grip, then stepped off the platform and began moving toward the central spine of the vessel. The command center guards had fully mobilized now, flooding the corridors with squads armed to the teeth. Harper heard their boots echoing as he descended through a service shaft. He moved with purpose, letting instinct guide him through the tight metal maze. The shaft opened into a long hallway filled with steam and electrical cables. Flames flickered from a ruptured pipe, making the air thick with heat. Harper wiped grime off his face and listened. A squad was approaching from behind. Another from ahead. He stepped into a maintenance alcove, pressed his back to the cold metal, and waited. The squads converged at the intersection with weapons drawn, each accusing the other of blocking the path. Harper stepped out only when they turned their weapons away from him for 1 second. In that second, he fired one precise shot. The bullet struck a loose bolt on the ceiling, ricocheted across the hallway, and snapped a fire suppression valve. A torrent of pressure blasted downward, knocking the soldiers into each other like dominoes. Harper left them coughing under the blast of foam and ran before they could recover. He reached the core chamber, an enormous circular structure filled with crackling energy coils and glowing conduits. The core itself pulsed like a beating heart at the center of the ship. A ring of armored troops surrounded it, guarding a console that displayed a single chilling phrase. Self-destruct sequence ready. Harper exhaled, feeling the heat radiating from the machinery. Destroying the ship would send debris toward the satellite, triggering its auxiliary weapons system. Earth would still end up being targeted. The faction intended to sacrifice themselves if it meant framing humanity as the spark of a galactic war. Harper took a step forward, and the guards tensed. One of them shouted that the order was to kill him if he came within 10 feet of the core. Harper tilted his head. That was a problem. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal sphere he had taken from the earlier containment room. It was not a weapon. It was a calibration tool used to align energy fields. But it was heavy, round, and perfect for bouncing. He threw it upward with a smooth arc. The guards instinctively aimed at it. Harper fired a single bullet at the sphere. The impact sent it spiraling across the room with violent new momentum. It slammed into a power coil, rebounding at an angle that jarred several guards off balance. The distraction was enough. Harper sprinted forward, diving behind a console as plasma bolts streaked past. The heat singed his sleeve. He gritted his teeth and rolled to the next console, moving in a zigzag pattern that kept the guards confused. A guard charged at him with a blade, but Harper caught the wrist, twisted, and flipped the alien over his shoulder in one controlled motion. The blade clattered uselessly across the floor. The commander responsible for the entire operation emerged from behind the core, his face twisted with fury and desperation. He shouted that Harper's existence was a threat to the galactic balance, and that no single human should be able to do what Harper had done. He activated the final command, and the core began glowing brighter. The self-destruct countdown appeared in the air. 50 seconds. Harper rose from behind the console and approached the commander. Their eyes locked. The commander drew a plasma pistol and pointed it directly at Harper's chest. Harper remained steady, rifle angled low. The commander ranted that the galaxy needed to fear humans again, because without fear, the balance of power would break. Harper replied that true balance was never built on fear. It was built on understanding. He stepped forward. The commander fired. Harper shifted his weight by an inch, letting the bolt scorch past him. He fired once. The bullet struck the pistol, bouncing it from the commander's grip. The commander reached for a console, but Harper was already there. He grabbed the alien by the collar and slammed him against the terminal, knocking him unconscious. 40 seconds. Harper studied the core controls. The interface pulsed in patterns he did not recognize, but the structure told him everything he needed. 3 conduits fed the explosion cycle. Severing them would halt the countdown. He dropped to one knee and fired upward. The bullet hit a support beam, ricocheted off a rotating power ring, and landed precisely in the first conduit. Sparks erupted. 30 seconds. Harper moved left, firing again. The second conduit ruptured. The chamber groaned as energy surged unevenly. The heat intensified. 20 seconds. The third conduit was on the upper balcony. Harper ran toward the ladder but stopped halfway, calculating the distance. His joints ached from running and fighting, but he steadied himself, inhaled deeply, and fired. The bullet soared upward, struck the railing, ricocheted from a steel plate, and drove into the final conduit. The countdown froze at 11 seconds, then blinked away. The energy coils dimmed. The core stabilized. Silence rolled through the chamber, followed by the low moan of systems recalibrating. Harper leaned against the railing, breathing heavily as the adrenaline slowly eased. The guards stared in disbelief. None dared approach. The commander groaned on the floor, muttering that the galaxy would judge Harper for what he had done. Harper replied quietly that legends were not born from approval but from necessity. Moments later, emergency broadcasts lit up every screen on the ship. The truth had been leaked by anonymous sources. Footage revealed how the faction manipulated information, framed Earth, and attempted mass destruction. The galaxy watched as their schemes unraveled in real time. Harper stepped into the stream of light from the broadcast screen as announcements declared humanity absolved and the faction responsible for treason. Harper walked the quiet corridors with his rifle hanging loosely at his side. Soldiers stepped aside instead of attacking. Word of his actions spread faster than the alarms ever had. When he reached the extraction bay, an Alliance shuttle waited for him. The diplomat rushed forward, eyes wide with awe and